Have you ever wondered what makes creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how ideas become paintings or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community, and we'll explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. Today, I'll be ArtStorming with the ultimate and original compulsive creative, Summers Randolph. I met Summers in the winter of 2018. A bunch of artists and friends had gathered to watch the Eagles-Patriots play the Super Bowl. It was a riveting game, even for a non-football fan like me. At halftime, I went outside to get a beer and noticed a guest hanging out on the porch who looked like he could actually be a football player, and yet he was totally uninterested in the game. I teased him a little bit about missing out on all the action inside and asked him what his story was. "I work with stone," he said, in a way that made me totally want to know more. Well, that was the kickoff to my friendship with sculptor Summers Randolph. Soon after that Eagles Super Bowl victory, I took the first of many trips to Summers' stone yard, studio, and showroom. In addition to being a big guy, Summers is a big personality, and rightfully an important figure in the Santa Fe arts scene. Have a listen. So I'm here with Summers Randolph, sculptor extraordinaire, and he's actually polishing. What did you say you're doing?
Filing.
Filing. Well, he's filing, that's for sure. He's filing as we speak, so you're going to hear that noise in the background, and my editors are going to probably hate me for it.
Oh, they'll squeal.
But
Well.
that's actually what it's like to talk to Summers on a Monday afternoon in the summer. He's working on some, you call them littles or smalls?
Yeah.
Littles. And I'm looking at a pile of these beautiful serpentine-shaped stones that are all carved out of one chunk of stone, but you would think that they were made out of saltwater taffy. They're so sinuous. So I walked in, and there was a pile on the floor, and Summers described that he just had a mini disaster. And the last time I was here, there was this wall of hanging small sculptures, and apparently one of them took a nosedive. So it happens to the best of you, huh?
Oh yeah, here's another busted one. Look at this. This was really nice.
Oh, that was... And so that looks like it busted right on the...
I was filing away and it just...
snapped.
Yeah.
So I guess you've been doing this long enough that you've learned how to deal with those with...
Well, I no longer cry over the losses. I mean, you know, losses happen. Sometimes the stone doesn't want to be what you're trying to make it. As for this, that's totally my mistake, the crash of the hanging piece. But when they break, I tell apprentices when I hire them, I say, you're going to break a piece, and you're going to cry. And they go, oh no, I'll never break a piece. And then 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months later, they're coming crying because they broke a piece. It just happens. You're cradling a piece with your left hand and sanding with your right, and you have to push with your right hand and cradle with your left hand. And sometimes the left hand just squeezes, you're holding too tight, and the piece breaks.
And that's got to be so heartbreaking, because it's not like a piece of paper. I mean, it's something that it's taken quite a bit of time to get it to that point. It already has
hours. That's right. It already has hours in it. But all the pieces you see around here represent unpaid hours. When people ask me how much is that piece and how long did it take, they want to figure out how many dollars per hour I'm making, and all I have to do is show them, 50 finished pieces that are not paid for, and they get that equation doesn't work. It's not the same thing as a lawyer earning $400 an hour. The equation's not the same at all. I've got as many hours in what I do as he does in what he does.
Well, not to mention that you've got to buy a big honking piece of stone and get it here from wherever. And that piece that you showed me last time I was here that represented stone from all over the world. So you're not just talking about walking out to the
that way. When we were younger, we'd drive down to Borrego Springs from Santa Barbara and load up a pickup truck of alabaster and come home and carve it. And it wasn't costing us, vast amounts of money. Now the stone from around the world is import sometimes buying from other sculptors. Stone carvers are going out of business and dying.
Why is that? The dying I get because
there just aren't very many of us. There are not very many people carving stone.
Well, it's not exactly easy material to move around with you. I mean, painters, it's one thing to have a canvas and some tubes of paint. And even I spoke to an artist you might know, Kate Rivers, and she carves up, hundreds of dollars of books, but that's different.
Oh, is she carving books?
Well, she's not carving them, but she'll pull them apart. And she's got first editions, and she's tried to get rid of them
like
to places.
Jim Baker does with his Bibles.
Exactly. So I mean, she's had to kind of make her peace with using books that she's a big book person, so she really likes books, and tearing them apart to use in her artwork, she now equates to using. She's either going to archive them or she's going to use them. So
I've always admired the people that can put treasures together. I've got thousands of little things I've picked up that I love, the shape of, or the color of, or the texture of, or the history of. And there are people who can do assemblage sculpture and burn it out and cast it in bronze, or just glue these things together in provocative ways, or in making another shape out of them. I can't do that with my treasures. Each one is too wonderful, and I encounter them. I've collected them. They're in jars and drawers and different places around the place, but I can't turn them into something else.
But that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you take a big block of stone and turn it into the most refined version of one of your sort of shapes. You have sort of a language of shapes that you use, but each one is just one shape. So I can't imagine. I don't think of your pieces as an assemblage of anything. It's usually one.
Well, but I'm talking about a different kind of sculpture. I'm talking about different treasures. Little, like if you've got kids' blocks that happen to have belonged to your little sister 50 years ago, they have her in them. Yeah. And then gluing them together to say Trump sucks or something else, it violates them somehow in their spirit. I think objects I believe plants are sentient beings, and I think objects too can inherit energy. I had a couple here this morning. These guys have been together 48 years. And they were here this morning, and they were talking about which pieces they liked and which ones they might want at home. And the one piece had too much energy for the one of them. And the other one loved that one because it had so much energy. And then the second guy says, well, I like this one because it's peaceful. It's sort of, the energy is all going in. It's all absorptive. It's all quiet and calm. And he goes, but the color. So it was a real struggle for them to figure out. But you're right. The objects were what they were purchasing. They were back. They had 2 pieces in their apartment in New York, and they want one in their garden in Santa Fe. And they were experiencing the sculpture. I mean, they were feeling it was just interesting to listen to them choose.
And what was it like for you? Because you were the maker, or you were the one, if you consider yourself a maker, you were the one who drew that shape out of the stone, and you listened to what the stone was saying to you and kind of had that dance with it. So were they picking up on what you felt when you were carving them, or was it like a whole new
Sometimes
thing?
The nature of but occasionally people see completely different pieces. I have a piece that I think of as like a seed pod, and it's a rounded shape on the bottom and then a big leaf coming up. And I thought of that piece as representing the first leaf that then feeds the rest of the plant. And you don't know with that first leaf if it's going to be a vine or if it's going to be an oak tree. It's just that first leaf coming up. You know it's going to be a what do you call it, dicot? Anyway, I'm showing this to my friend Raleigh Grambois, who's another carver, a Chippewa from up in Jemez Springs. And Raleigh grabs the top end of the leaf and swings it over his shoulder, and he goes, "No, Summers, nice war club." Because the seed at the end looked like the striking end of a war club.
Wow.
And so people see what they see. It's not always, I get to see 1,000 things when I'm making something. And they see what they see. It's why I never title my work. Watch somebody go into a museum and look at an abstract piece, and the first thing they do is go up and read the label. Well, they call it lovers. Well, it doesn't look like lovers to me, and that's the end of it. Whereas if you don't tell them what it is, they step back and they go, "I wonder what it is. You know, he did it, and this is the date, and this is the material, but I wonder what it is." You get 20 seconds more of engagement if you don't put a title on it. And people always end up naming their work because they want to refer to it. But they get to name it.
Very interesting. So when people come through, you've got a gallery that has completed pieces, you've got a stone yard with works in progress, you've got pieces all around your house. When people walk around and engage with your pieces, can you sort of tell who's going to be drawn to what?
Not so much who's drawn to what, but pardon me, that's 50 years of stone dust. Not so much who's drawn to what, but rather whether or not they like my work. I mean, I get people up here that just aren't moved. They just don't see it. And then there are people that are totally fascinated and have to touch it and feel it and experience it. So you can tell pretty quickly. In Santa Barbara, I used to pile people into my van after the first 15 minutes when I figured out my work wasn't singing their name. And I'd pile them in my van and drive them around to my friends' studios so that they always ended up with something they liked. Because art collectors are the only ones that are rarer than artists. You know, you get a collector, you want them to be happy. You want them to end up with something.
Right. Well, that's an interesting conversation, too, because, you know, I know you well enough to know that you're not creating for collectors. I mean, you're one of those compulsive creatives, right?
Compulsive
so you're making it whether it has an audience or not, as evidenced by the number of pieces that don't have homes.
Mm-hmm.
But so, I mean, I get that you're sensitive to whether somebody's responding to it, but that's not your motivation for making them.
No, I don't like my work as merchandise. It's all sort of part of a sculptural experience. No, they're not babies. I'm happy to see them go, and I need a certain amount of money to support the guys who work for me and the household. But they're different ways of looking at art. You know, the people who look at it as purely investment are making a lot of money off supposedly blue chip. There's a company called Masterworks, and all they do is invest in paintings. And now we have a Basquiat, and the estimated value is $2,300,000, and we think we can sell it for $3,500,000, and you can buy a piece. I don't think they're all Masterworks. They're investable artists, but it's almost a whole different world. What's her face? Across from Mary Boone. One of her great quotes is, "I'd much rather sell a painting the third time." Because the third time it sells, there's no artist involved. It's just merchandise. And that's different, I think.
Well, yeah, that is completely different, because I know when I first came to see your work, of course I have an immediate, I need to touch the pieces. I mean, that's like my first thing. I'm kinesthetic, but these pieces really beg to be touched, in my opinion. And then there's, all the colors and the color variations. And then you step back and think, oh my God, this is stone. How the hell did he carve this shape out of a chunky block of stone? And I forget when I'm engaging with your pieces that this is a commodity that could be sold. I'm just interested in engaging with the piece for as long as I can. And then there's the next one, and then there's the next one, and then there's the next one. And they're all so beautiful. I would think that as a collector, the hardest thing would be to select a piece from your
There are people
inventory.
that buy more than one.
Well,
I have a few, multiple. They like to come see what's new and get that.
I can totally get that. And especially since you do offer such a range of sizes. I mean, you can do a really monolithic piece and then have a tiny little piece you can hold in your hand.
I have a friend and a bit of a mentor in the old days named Paul Lindhart. And Paul Lindhart operates something called Art City in Ventura, California. And Paul was making frogs. He was making these wonderful long-limbed bronze frogs with big floppy fingers and big floppy toes and a great frog face whose emotions were represented by the positions of the body. The face didn't really change much. And he was selling his frogs for $700. And he says, now these are the dollars. I'm 21 years old. These are the dollars. And dollars are wonderful when they come in. And then he opened an egg carton with 12 little hummingbirds with green heads and little bronze feet that you could clamp onto your houseplants if you wanted to. And he goes, these are the nickels. He goes, the nickels are what will pay your rent. And it's absolutely true. You have to have smaller pieces at a lower price range, is what I've found. Now, I'm not in that world of selling a piece 3 times because people buy my work, take it home, give it to their children, who give it to their children. It doesn't enter that tertiary blue chip market, and I don't think it ever will. I tell collectors now, I say, don't count on it being worth more than you pay for it.
Well, how does it feel, though? Or I guess I'm projecting, but I would think that it would feel better to be selling to people who want to just hang out
Own
with
it.
your work and touch it and have coffee with it. And
I did a show in Beverly Hills. It's called the Beverly Hills Affair in the Gardens, and it's right on Rodeo, right on Beverly Drive, up at the top of Rodeo Drive. And the average outfit was sweatsuit and checkbook, and usually a little dog on a long leash. And I sold a piece there to, I probably shouldn't talk about his name. Anyway, I sold a piece to this guy who you would know his name. And we went up to his house, and I said, well, this piece has a sandblasted surface. And he was putting it right in the curve of his big curved staircase that was sitting up inside the circle where you went upstairs. And I said, if people come along and they touch this part of it, the natural oils from their hands will make the sandblasted part look darker. And you can clean it with, and I was going to tell him, alcohol, and he goes, nobody's going to touch that sculpture except for me. And I'm like, okay. But people have different feelings. Some people love, I have a piece that my grandmother had on her coffee table, and my mother had it on her coffee table, and it's a little piece of wood. And you can feel them. You know, they used to take it off the coffee table and hold it while they had conversations, or their friends would. And all that energy is in that piece. Now, I guess that guy probably, well, he's probably dead, but I don't think he got that energy into that piece. Yeah. I believe in energy. I think pieces, I think shapes have inherent energy. Some of them are just, I have a problem with accidental sculpture. There's a lot of sculpture out there that's big, but it was created in an accidental way. I splashed the bronze out on the ice, and that was the shape, and I stood it up and polished it. or I blew it up and it took a shape and that's what it is. I'm much more interested in intentional shape and intentional form and figuring out how to make a piece represent something. Now, I have accidents. I have pieces that just sort of take a shape and they don't work. I've got a lot of work around here that I would tell you doesn't work. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't flow right. It doesn't, I have finished pieces that they don't aesthetically satisfy me. And probably there's not a piece that I wouldn't go back and fix in one way or another.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I would go back and...
pieces just are so, not to, be so over the top, but there's
you
such
go
perfection.
ahead. Be over the top.
There's such perfection. I can't imagine. They just sort of, like when they're done, it's not like a painting where, maybe there's another stroke to be put on it. Like when your pieces are done, they are so...
I'll show you when we walk around
I'd be
pieces
really curious
that don't work and why they don't work.
Well, I know you've been also working, there are certain, like a vocabulary, I would say, of shapes that you've been working with for quite some time that are very recognizably you. You gave me this hat that has one of your shapes sort of on it. And so you explore that shape in different sizes, different materials, but it's still your shape. And so since that's your shape, it's hard for me to imagine that there are any of those pieces that are your sort of vocabulary shapes.
No, there's some that are better and some that are worse. Because
of the stone, because of how your hands were?
No, it all has to do with the shape. The final shape, when you stop. And that's the whole game, stopping. It's not about going, it's about stopping. In carving, you can get smaller and smaller until you just have dust left. You have to stop. And with each tool, so if you're working with a tool that vibrates your piece a lot and you don't stop soon enough, then you break the piece. If you wait and stop too soon, then the next tool takes twice as long. So you have to push each tool as far as you can, but you also have to know when to stop.
And how has the length of time that you've been doing this influenced? Obviously you still have
I'm much better at
gauging that.
Yeah. You break less as you carve more.
And you've been carving. I'm going to be asking you some questions that I already know the answer to.
I did that piece up there when I was 15.
And did you know you were going to be working in stone from then on?
No, I did one in stone. I have one in stone that I did when I was 15, and I have one in wood. And I didn't know what my medium was going to be, but I did know I was going to be a sculptor.
When did you know? Well, 15, but
15, yeah.
What was that
I was
moment?
in high school. I took a course called, I don't remember the name of it, but we had a third of the course was architecture, and a third was sculpture, and a third was painting. And the sculptural part of it just spoke to me. I figured out at 15 that if you're the teacher and you're asking me a question, one of two things is true. Either you already know the answer or it's over there in the library. So really, what's the point? Why fill the hard drive? But in sculpture, a butt-headed independent kid like me could decide the material, the shape, the finish, when it was done, how it was mounted, how it was displayed. I got to make every decision. And then they gave me a grade that had the same weight as English, history, math, or science.
So you obviously had good teachers. They must have recognized.
Well, I don't know about that. I studied freshman year at Princeton with Joe Brown, who did the big bronze statues outside the Philadelphia Stadium. And Joe was really interesting. He had been a boxing coach, and then he had posed for a sculpture class, and he decided that he could do it better than the class. And so he did a few, and then the professor said, Joe, yours is better than the class. And so he just pursued it and went from being the boxing coach to the only tenured art professor in Princeton's history, probably will be forever. And Joe would put a model in front of our class, and we'd all sit around with little tables with clay on them, and he'd bring in his friends to play mandolin or to talk about art they'd made. And everybody would be doing the figure, and I would be making little loops and knots and curls. And Joe would walk over and he'd go, "I don't know, Randolph, just keep doing it." But he never said, "Dude, you're supposed to be doing the model." He said, "I don't know what you're doing, but just keep doing it." I mean, it was a total response.
That's so incredible. Now, when you went to Princeton, did you know you wanted to study with him? Was that something you...
No, I went to Princeton because they had a campus, and I wanted my college experience to be surrounded by walls. I knew about myself that I wanted protection during college.
Now, you'd been at a somewhat comparable situation where you were boarding school, right?
Well, yeah, but that was forced.
But that's where you had that first art experience, right? Or was that before you...
That's where I had the first art experience. I learned how to weld. I learned how to cast bronze.
And did they have really good facilities there so that you could go...
We had a little bitty room off to the side of the place. I mean, it wasn't... But we were allowed to do a lot of things that today everybody would be up in arms if anybody tried.
Right.
I mean, in 1972, you could melt bronze in a circle of fire bricks with a bunch of kids standing around it and a propane torch blowing, and then pour it and have pieces bounce off and get stuck in the shoes of the kids. I mean, it wasn't a litigious time. It was an experiential time, and that was a wonderful pool to learn how to make art in. But Princeton walls, had I been smart about an art career, if I'd known that, okay, everything you do has to be involved with an art career instead of this is just a chapter of college, I would have gone to Yale, who have a visual arts department and a visual arts graduate school and support their alumni. But I didn't know that. And I'm grateful I have the friends I have, and I did my 4 years at an academic school. But yeah, it was Joe Brown was a good experience.
And when you left Princeton, did you know you were going to pursue this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is all I ever wanted to do. I went to California and taught at a prep school called Cape, which is north of LA. And
that was your first job after
I taught
school?
Sculpture. I taught the kids how to build tree houses. I mean, we had fun.
Yeah. So teaching, lighting other people up and kind of getting them interested. And did you teach them your shapes, or did you just be like Joe Brown and say...
I was carving they gave me a garage studio to carve in. And no, the kids need to learn more about... They need to unlearn more than they need to learn in order to make art. They've got all these rules in their heads. And if you sit them down and give everybody a lump of clay and say, okay, make a head, you have 3 minutes, go. Well, everybody knows how to poke 2 holes for eyes and a hole for the mouth and stick on some ears. And at the end of 3 minutes, you put them all in the middle of the table and you say, okay, does anybody not recognize a head? Everything here is a head. Okay, take your lump back. All right, now you have 5 minutes, make an animal. Go. And you have to teach them that as much energy as they put into it, they have to be able to crush it up and start over. And as soon as they realize that it's just fun and we're just making stuff, the things that come out of these kids are brilliant. But they needed that kind of teaching rather than, carve a specific shape. Mm-hmm. That wasn't. Really?
Well, I can totally see that for sort of like just getting people engaged in process. And then there's mastery, which is sort of another 50
level. Years down the road. Yeah. Right. Mastery is another 50 years down
Or
the
let's
road.
say craftsmanship, which is maybe the process along the way to mastery. Mm-hmm. And so the craftsmanship or where did you learn the craft? Was that the trial and error that in Joe Brown's class you were carving loop-de-loops and you just
I wasn't carving. That was clay.
That was clay.
I was working with clay.
Okay.
Everybody got a lump of clay, same as I told you about the kids.
Right. Did any of the kids that you were teaching ever produce like not a head with eyes and
No, mostly given a 5-minute go, they tried to do what they were doing, yeah. Mm-hmm. But the other exercise you can give kids is I give them a stack of newspaper and a roll of adhesive tape and say, okay, big, that's your assignment. And you separate them into 4 groups so it's a competition. And then you tell them big. And the ones that figure out they can roll tubes and build things always win. And then there are ones that ball up the paper and glue it to each other. And there've been all kinds of different solutions to that problem. But again, it's architectural, it's sculptural. What's at the end? Do you have something you like?
Well, it's so interesting that you say big because, my God, you're a big guy. Mm-hmm. And so did you always work big?
There's a great sculptor's joke about big, which is that if you can't make it good, make it big. And if you can't make it big, make it red. And if you can't make it red, make a whole shitload of them. And that's a sculptor's joke because all those things happen.
Yeah.
People make bad work big and they make big work red,
Well, do you prefer working big or small? Now.
You can make a lot more pieces if you work small.
And is making more pieces what you love?
They take a number of, if you're chasing a shape, yeah. This piece, which will sit a number of different ways, is modeled off of the one over there on the shelf. And I'm trying to find the answer to this rhythm of curves which start and go 1, 2, 3 and back to where you started. And there are different ways of getting there. The curves don't have to keep going the same direction. They can change and go a different direction.
So I notice on this piece that there's a little connector piece. Is that going to stay there? Or is that going to...
No, it's there just to hold it together while I'm working on it.
While you're working on it, so you don't crush it with the weight.
So you don't crush it or you don't... vibration travels. So if you're working on a piece with no connections, this one has one left here, and you're filing here, the vibration will travel as far as it can. So it gets larger as it travels. I don't know what that is. Some sound wave guy could tell you more, but as the vibration travels, it makes the piece more friable.
Wow, listen to that sound.
Glassy.
It's very glassy. So when you showed me last time I was here some pieces in the stone yard that you haven't, you got a certain place with them and now they're just sort of sitting there waiting for them to speak to you again. How many pieces do you usually have? Obviously you've got another here at the same time, but how many pieces are you actively working on at any one time?
I counted once last year, and I just went around the front of the studio. I didn't count up here. I just walked around in front of the shelves and counted the pieces that were on the front, and I had 50 different pieces in 30 different kinds of stone going all at the same time.
And who gets your attention when you walk in the studio? How do you know where to go?
Well, sometimes I wake up with it, and I know exactly what I want to do that day. And sometimes I have to walk down the hill and wander around and see who's talking.
Yeah.
And pieces do talk.
Do they?
They do talk. I'm not a woo-woo guy. I'm not a this crystal will do this for your life or any of that stuff. But I put a piece of black granite down there that was about 6,000 pounds, and it had been drilled in the old-fashioned with a bunch of holes and broken loose from whatever mountain it was part of. And I put it down in the studio, and I went down to work the next day, and it was dead silent. It was like cardboard. There was nothing going on. And I've learned not to work, because you just ruin stones. If you try to work when you don't know where you're going or what you're doing, you're just wasting material. So I go back up to the house. I go down the next day, nothing. The next day, nothing. After a week, there was something wrong. So I stood in the middle of the studio, and I closed my eyes, and I put my head down, and I tried to pay attention to what was. And that piece of black granite was sucking the energy out of the entire studio. It was pulling it. I don't know how to describe it. It was like a black hole in the corner of the studio. It was as if that stone was pissed off. So I went over and I sliced the corner, just a little 4-inch corner, and I sliced it off, and then I ground it, and then I ground it again, and then I sanded it, and then I polished it, and I got it absolutely shiny. So the very corner of that 6,000-pound block was shiny. And the whole studio came back to life, and everybody was okay. And I don't know. It could all be in my head. It could all be totally imaginary. But I experienced it as an active calming down of energy in a rock that then allowed the whole rest of the studio to talk.
Well, I have to say, there aren't that many people who work with materials so intimately for such a long period of time. So if anybody's going to know whether stones have resonance, it's going to be somebody like you. Right? I mean,
probably. I'll take that.
Yeah, and so I think having respect for that material is one of the reasons that those materials allow you to approach them and not be more brittle.
Well, that piece is very happily placed at the end of a pool in Palm Beach, so it's a featured place.
It was a diva.
And a lot of big dog people are looking at it, so that's nice.
Can you tell when you finish a piece whether it's going to be, the kind of piece that is going to end up in Palm Beach, or whether it's going to be the kind of piece that sits in your studio?
No.
Just no telling what.
There's no telling how or where I will meet the people that end up with my work.
And do you have a piece that you've done that you consider sort of your sort of work of art? From your standards, not from the standard of the success or, how much it sold for or whatever. Is there one in your collection that you've done so far that's your masterpiece?
No. The next one.
The next one. Of course.
The next one.
Yeah. And would you consider just as possible for the next one and the masterpiece to be a small piece, or do you generally like to work?
I like that little whittled sofa over there.
Well,
that's porcelain. That's just whittled in porcelain, and it's dry. It needs to be fired still. But it's just a sofa. But boy, I like it. It looks like a sofa to me. And for some reason, that pleases me as much as this does. That won't make any money, but this will.
Well, I just want to say, and I don't know if this will make it into the podcast, but that touches me very deeply, because for my birthday a couple of years ago, you gave me a sofa.
There you go, see?
And so I have one of your sofa pieces with porcelain painted.
I adore them. I think they feel right.
Well, they're really terrific and so different from your other work.
A whole different direction.
So you mentioned you did some wood pieces. Are they the same shapes as the stone pieces or the porcelain?
No, the more recent wood ones are pieces of driftwood that have enough wood left in to carve something out of. So it's still driftwood, but it's also got some carving.
That's got to feel so different from the stone.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole different experience. I had a good sander for a while, and that helps a lot. Sanding wood is just a pain in the neck.
When you say a good sander, somebody who was physically sanding the wood for you as opposed to a machine that was...
No, right. A person.
A person. Yeah. And so how many people are in your studio now?
Well, as of let's see. There are 3 hired now, and there may be another. There's a girl coming who just graduated RISD, and she will need to know how to put on safety glasses and hold a grinder.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, how do you move those big pieces around? I mean, you've got pieces that weigh more than I do.
I have a crane named Ichabod.
That's right. Ichabod crane.
Yeah, Ichabod crane.
So when you're when a piece stops talking to you and you're still it's still in progress.
I put it aside.
Does Ichabod crane just sort of put it over in the corner?
Well, it depends on what size.
Right,
but
right.
Yeah, I have a lot of pieces that are put up. When I said I have 50 pieces going at once, some of those haven't been touched in 3 or 4 years. Because I ran out of stone, the piece didn't work, I didn't know where it was going to go or how to rescue what I had begun. There was a fatal flaw. Usually, when you see a flawed piece, you just go ahead and break it so that you can move ahead and make something out of what's left. But
so this might become something smaller.
Oh yeah, sure. This could easily be a little shape. I mean, those go together really well.
Yeah.
Whether this takes another, there are ways to go anthropomorphic and ways to go make it look like machine or play with the texture or embed. I'm getting ready to embed some lapis into calcite, and I think that's going to be really pretty.
Oh yeah.
It will fly in the face of traditional Santa Fe jewelry because I won't be doing the cabochon approachment, but it'll be fun to do.
Flying in the face of something? I can't imagine.
Yeah, right. Never.
So do you ever wake up and not do stone?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do when you hit is that like I wouldn't call it a roadblock, but you're just not in the mood?
I go down and walk around. I check in with the guys. And if I don't feel like working, I just come back up to the house and go buy groceries. There are a lot of things to fill your time. But I don't... there are also a lot of variety jobs about sculpture. I mean, you have to market, you have to photograph, you have to set up a gallery and paint the floors gray. That's what I'll do later today. Presentation, so that people come into your space if they're looking at art. I mean, I'm not showing in a gallery currently.
Right, and I should tell our listeners that you do have a gallery space that is ready to receive busloads of people if need be.
It does regularly.
It does, yeah. And so people come out here, and you're on Museum Hill in Santa Fe, so it's a great location for you.
It's close. It's just a mile from the plaza, so it's nice to have people visit.
And so how much of the work of marketing your work do you have to do these days since you don't have a gallery?
Well, I have somebody who helps me with that also, but we have to generate the imagery and the verbiage and put it all together.
Yeah.
Entertain podcasters who just happen to drop by and want to, take your afternoon.
Well, so what happens when you wake up with this you just know what needs to happen next on a piece, but you've got a busload of middle-aged women coming to fondle your sculptures.
It's a conflict.
Yeah, I bet it would be.
It takes time.
Yeah. I mean, but you're so good at it. I mean, you're good at both.
I'm also good at screwing in light bulbs, but I try not to do it in every house I go to. I mean, I'm good at moving refrigerators and pianos, but I learned a while ago that that's not my job. And if you say, "Oh, I'll bring the truck, but I'm not going to put a hand on the piano," they're coming out of a second-story window, and somebody's going to get hurt if you don't go help. And so I don't do it. Yeah. You have to, because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. But it's fairly easy for me to tour 40 people at a time through I start them over here and take them down to the studio and introduce myself and the work. And then I take them down to the studio, and then I bring them up into the house and into the gallery. And it's sort of part of what you have to do.
But is it rewarding for you to see people light up? And when you see, I would imagine that would be, or would you just be happy never to have to see clients?
No. I like to see, there's always somebody who's, enthralled by the work. And that feeds me. What feeds me far more, eclipses the feeling of somebody liking my work, is sitting around the table with 9 other artists who I haven't met, who I might have met once, or I might know, but putting 10 compulsive creative people around a table and having dinner served is the coolest thing I have done since I've been in Santa Fe. It is wonderful.
And you've had about 6 or 7 of those dinners now?
I've had 4.
Only
and
4.
I'm going to have 4 more, and then I'm going to have a party. Springtime, we'll have a party.
I hope I'm here for it.
It's going to be really fun because it will be compulsive creatives. There's something, I say compulsive creative, I kind of came up with that term for the party. And it doesn't mean compulsive like a character disorder. It means that there are people, and I'd like to include writers and musicians and everybody wants to be an artist, right? They're calling, tight ends in NFL artists. But there are people who, and again, it's hard to say this without sounding woo-woo, There are people who receive messages and are compelled to make stuff. And they continue to do it. I have a quote on my door down there. I wish I was reading it. It says something like the creative person is a child who survived.
Brilliant.
You're supposed to do other things than make stuff. You're supposed to make stuff for them. You're supposed to process this or sell that or paint that but there are people who stick to their childhood need to make stuff. And they're lucky.
They are lucky.
They're lucky.
So what, of the conversations that you've had, what are some of the things that have stuck with you that delighted you the most?
One guy sat at the head of the table and he goes, well, I think making art is like praying. Okay, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And then we've had talks about when you don't feel like working. If you've spent years making stuff, and then one day you wake up and you're completely disinterested in that direction of work, and you don't know what you will do, it's a real treading water, oh my God, what happened to me feeling.
I'm sure it's existentially terrifying.
It is. Yeah. Because then what do you do?
Yeah. Especially people who have really gotten into a particular groove. There are artists that I know who are fearless about going in one direction and then pivot another direction, another direction. And they're fearless in the sense that, they know it's coming through. They know something's coming through, and they're not even really attached to what it is. But I would imagine that for somebody I can't imagine doing the same thing kind of over and over,
Some of the best artists do many different things. Michelangelo was an architect and a sculptor and did paintings that are still some of the best ever.
Well, you're multifaceted. Most of the people that I've been talking to do sculpture and painting and, sometimes music in addition to that. So the people that you've chosen for your dinners, are they people that you knew pretty well and you just wanted to get them together? Was it about
No, there are as many people that I've known as that I've known. I mean, people whose reputations I know or people whose work I've seen and liked. And I just track them down and get them to dinner. It's really fun.
Did you sort of curate who was coming?
No, I haven't built the dinners. No, and I haven't recorded the dinners, which is, I think, a shame. But I asked 2 dinners in a row about being recorded. And the first group said, well, I would have never said this about that gallery. And I thought, oh, okay, they probably ought to be able to say that. And then the second group thought that maybe they would not have been as free with their comments with each other if I had recorded it. But boy, I think it would be neat, because some of the things that are said, we were talking about the very thing about when you don't have an idea, and some of the comments were just wonderful. I mean, it gets personal.
Well,
but what's neat is the only thing in common is that we're all compelled to make stuff.
Well, what's interesting about that to me is because, certainly those of us who are non-artists have moments where we don't know what to do all the time. And so what happens when you creatives, I mean, the people who it looks like they can do anything, where do you go in for you, Summers, where do you go in your mind when you're at a stop? I mean, do you have a ritual that you do? I mean, you said you'll just go walk around the stone yard to see if anybody wants to have a conversation with you in terms of the materials. But is there another sort of practice that you have? You just sit long enough?
No, I go play with stuff. I mean, I there are times when I'm off on a detour. So I'm carving porcelain, or I'm wrapping wire around stuff, or I'm hammering little pieces of parking lot steel wire, or what other detours? Oh, I cut a bunch of river rocks in half and glued glass in the middle of them. I did the whole rock and roll series where I was sticking wheels in rocks and making them roll, and that was all fun.
Right. And so can you feel it when the energy to carve again starts to come through you, or you recognize the signs of it now? You've been doing it long enough.
Well, I'm stumbling over the stones, all the time.
Yeah. So for the dinner parties going forward, you said you wanted to have a big party. Would that be to reunite all the different groups?
Well, I just thought it'd be fun. I mean, it's sort of like, you paid your dues, you came to dinner, so let's have a party.
And are you in touch with everybody that you've...
I have all their contact.
But I mean, was there follow-up conversation that you were burning down with some of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, well, I think it's so cool that you finally did that. You and I talked about doing that a long time ago, and
It kind of reminds me of when I moved to Santa Fe, and I had a little place down on Delgado Street that Tana Acton had vacated, and I got it, which was wonderful. And I made business cards that said, "Coffee, my place, 9 to 10," and had the address, and that's all it said. And so when I saw somebody that I liked in the grocery store, or I ran into somebody shopping for hardware, or anywhere you meet people, you recognize people who you think, well, we might have a good conversation, or they look like a bright person, or that's somebody I want to know more about. And so I would just give them these cards, "Coffee, 9 to 10, my place." And when we finally, the landlord said, "I don't know what you have going on back there, but it's got to stop." And we had 25 people coming with competitive baking and everything else just to have a cup of coffee from 9 to 10. And my greatest compliment was Carol LaRoche was sitting on the porch. And Carol looked at me and she said, "Summers, this reminds me of the old Santa Fe." And I was like, yes, I've arrived.
Well, it seems to me like there might be something of the old Santa Fe coming back, which is a perfect segue to what brought you to Santa Fe, and why do you think so many people gravitate to Santa Fe?
Well, everybody's got different reasons for coming to Santa Fe. I think Santa Fe attracts a bunch of broken people, myself, looking to be healed, and they pretty generally get kicked out of Santa Fe. Not by any real reason, but Santa Fe chooses its inhabitants. You've heard this, and it is true. You've witnessed it probably by now, that there are people who you think are the perfect Santa Fe citizen. And they get here, and then their mother is ill, or they have to travel somewhere, or their property in California is swamped, and they end up moving. Whatever it is, Santa Fe loses the people that it doesn't want to live here. I feel fortunate that I'm one that it said, okay, you can hang out, and we'll be good to you. And again, all that's woo-woo, isn't it? Maybe I am a woo-woo person. But Santa Fe, the way I chose it was every time I crossed I-40, and moving a stone studio from Santa Barbara to Nashville requires a lot of trips. And I would always turn up and go to the classic flea market that is now a casino, and I would always find a treasure. I would fall in love for the weekend. I would take a hike that raised the hair on my arm. Santa Fe always had its welcome out for me. And so when I wore out Nashville, Tennessee, it was time to move, and Santa Fe was the next logical place. I was here. I had dinner with my dad, and he said, "Son, don't you have anything positive to say?" And I said, I really don't. I need to leave. And 6 months later, I lived in Santa Fe.
Well, aside from the sort of broken, wounded spirits, a lot of artists specifically come here. Is there something about Santa Fe, other than artists are kind of wacky people?
No, I think artists, there's wonderful light. So the light is right up top. The fact that every day you'll see a piece of blue sky. I don't think I've ever driven across the country and seen New Mexico without seeing some little patch of blue. There's something about the light that is magic, and I think that's what drew artists here initially. My experience has been that people will say, "Oh, you moved to Santa Fe from Nashville, what a great art community." And it's really not. It's not a great art community as I've experienced it. And I got to do the first round of Meow Wolf here. I mean, I contributed light boxes to that thing. That was as close to a community as you're going to have in Santa Fe, because artists who are making a living are busy working. It's not. So
when you say community, you don't mean the numbers of artists living here. You mean the interactions among the artists.
The sense of community, the knowledge of one another. I remember Nashville had a wonderful art community. We had all kinds of group shows and parties, and Nashville, and that's because there was a dearth of visual artists. When you met a visual artist, you said, "Oh my God, you're a painter, please come." Here in Santa Fe, everybody's a visual artist.
Yeah, and there are a lot of galleries too. Friday nights are certainly an opportunity to circulate, and a lot of the people that I've met in the arts community were through the...
I've always felt that I should have done Friday nights in Santa Fe since I got here. But you can't see the art. It's all about the people elbowing each other and saying hi to each other, and nobody, or at least I can't see the art when the gallery's full of people.
Right.
It's not. It's about see and be seen and be part of it. And maybe that art scene is the art community that I missed. And that's entirely possible.
It may be, because I'm not a creative in that sense, but
You did the Friday nights and met a lot of people.
I met a lot of people. And maybe because I had urban art tripping as a kind of a way of engaging people in conversation, and it was a way for me to meet people. I've certainly met you that way. It gave me an access point. But Friday nights became kind of an important, until you start seeing the same people over and over again, and then there's a limit to that. And there's a reason that I'm traveling beyond Santa Fe now and coming back. And I hope I'm at that point where I'm still welcome by Santa Fe.
Sure.
Even though I'm going away a lot. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this project was to re-engage with...
Where else are you going to go and find your artists? Wherever you end up?
Yeah, well, I don't plan on ending up anywhere but Santa Fe, but I think everywhere that I go, there's an art element there. When I'm in New York, certainly it's there. I haven't met as many makers in New York because it's expensive to be a painter or an artist in the city. But there are people peripheral to that who are doing that, and I'm traveling all over the place. I've been going to Europe. So I'm hoping to find artists wherever I go. And that's how I got to Santa Fe. I mean, I actually was doing that cross-country road trip, met artists everywhere I went. When I got to Santa Fe, there just happened to be the sort of largest concentration of people that I had met so far. So I stuck my flag here. And it was the right choice.
Good place to stick a flag.
Yeah, it's a great place to stick a flag.
I bet Barry would agree.
Yeah, I think he would. But I think he's also somebody who, being an artist himself, most people don't think of him as an artist. They know him as a gallerist and a collector. But he's also an artist. I'm trying to get him back in the studio.
One of the crossing points, one of the most difficult things to overcome as an artist is the judgment.
Say more.
And I know a lot of people who say, well, I was a sculptor. And what they mean is they started. But when it comes time to walk away from your piece and let it be judged, you have to be done with that piece. And that's a real hump. It's hard to be judged. If you've dealt with artists in Santa Fe, saying you're an artist in Santa Fe that's a leap, that's a statement. And I kind of don't experience it now. I think that's part of having carved 50 years is I don't ever carve for somebody else. I carve for me. I've got my own parameters and my own perfections and my own things that I'm chasing. I'm not carving worrying about what you're going to think of it when I'm done. But initially, that's really hard. Because I've got to take this and set it out there and say, okay, there it is, it's finished. What do you think? Now, it's all about what I think. And it's only about what I think. And then finally, if somebody walks through the gallery and they say, oh, I love that, and I want to take that home and live with it, great. But I'm lucky to have been able to carve the way I've carved, rather than depending on commissions or committees or, votes of...
You think you'll ever stop carving?
Yeah.
When? And you said that with such clarity.
I'm contemplating my exit now. I have stories I want to write.
Right.
Yeah. I have things I want to write down, and I don't think I can do both at the same time. The business of sculpture is pretty much all consuming. I see myself in a little cabin by a pond with a dock and a writing tablet and one of those great little curved over desk lamps. Got one right there. No, I don't think I told Coco once that if she found me on my back, stone dead with a running grinder in my hand, I will have ended peacefully. And I think that's true. And I want to do some other things as well.
So the next time I come, it will be to talk to Summers Randolph, the writer. Not the next time.
Probably won't be here.
All right.
It probably won't be here. There's an awful lot of 23 years of history in this house. And I don't think I can write about things from my past or without
energy.
I have to be absent of all the memories in this space.
I get that. Would it be Tennessee?
No, it would definitely. But the politics in Tennessee, I can't.
Couldn't think.
As beautiful as it is, and it is beautiful, I cannot stomach the politics. So it won't be Tennessee, Texas, or Florida. I never experienced Northern California, and I'm really attracted to the redwoods. And the Oregon coast is just, that part of the country is magic for me. I just experienced some southern Michigan, and I really liked it up there. Maine, I find really attractive. Of those, Oregon is the most logical for somebody who's 70 plus years old because you don't have to shovel as much snow.
Or Northern California, I guess.
Or Northern California. Yeah, I don't know. I spend a lot of time on Zillow. I sit and look at places I could afford that, you know.
I can't imagine Santa Fe without Summers Randolph, but I'll be curious to see where you go from here.
When you move as an adult, you piss people off. I've done it twice. I've moved from Santa Barbara and I moved from Nashville. And your friends are offended that where they live is not where you want to live. And so even your friends get a little pissed that you're abandoning the reality that they've known with you. But I think I have the energy for one more move.
That's a perfect place to end it.
Good.
All right. So thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on artstorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode, with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.